Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on A World Awakening. I'm wearing my Stay Wild shirt. I've got my amethyst and I got it all going. My hair's out of control, but cancer. What are you going to do? So anyway, I am thrilled to welcome a new guest to the show, and somebody that most of you probably do not know yet. Honestly, I've known him for a whole 5 minutes longer than you'll get to know him. He comes highly recommended from across the pond. You know how much British I have in me between Scottish, Irish, and English. I'm like mostly that in terms of my heritage, my ethnic heritage, my lineage. So it's always wonderful. And I'm a sucker for an English accent. So without further ado, let me introduce our new friend, Simon Bown.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's lovely to have you. When Bill told me about you, he said, "Oh, Annie, this is a perfect fit for A World Awakening. This man has such depth and such character, and is a preeminent researcher." And so I was like, yes. I think he was like 30 seconds into his explaining who you were to me, and I'm sorry that I didn't know who you were before. I thought I knew everybody in the entire world that worked in the paranormal. I really did. But it is lovely to meet you, Simon, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you. I think we can have a great conversation.
Absolutely. Of everything that you research, everything that you write about as an author, everything that you investigate, what is most fascinating to you?
Well, the basis of my podcast, really, it's evidence of an afterlife.
Yes.
So it could be children with past life memories or near-death experiences where people see things while their body is dead, and they come back and say, "I saw this and this," and people say, "But you were dead when that happened. There's no way you could have seen that."
Right.
And that's good evidence that consciousness continues after we die. And that's the basis of my book as well, that I've written.
Well, I had, this comes highly recommended from several sources, as a matter of fact. So, folks, if you're fascinated as I am by this subject, please avail yourself of the opportunity to read Simon's new book. And Bill will also attach it to the archive of the show too. So you'll be able to find it, and you can also find it on my Facebook, and we'll put it everywhere for him so that people in America can see what they're doing across the pond over there, which is phenomenal. I mean, when you think about it, Simon, most of the homes, I went to Scotland a couple of years ago, and I don't think I stepped into a building that was younger than 600 years old. And what I found when I got there, whether it was talking with people around Bonnie Bridge or, when we were up in the Highlands, it didn't matter where we were. If I was talking to somebody that was from Scotland, they not only had no fear of the subject that I was talking about, but it was also a sense that I got from them anyway of, we know. We know. Of course you know. You are living among the dead of the spirits of an ancient country and culture. Of course you know. When people talk about, we saw Mary Queen of Scots walking through, it's like, of course you did. Of course you did. And so there's almost kind of an acceptance that borders on nonchalance about the subject. At least that's what I encountered. But there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to explore. I don't think that we'll ever have all the answers, nor do I think that we're necessarily supposed to. But when I hear or read about or interview somebody that's had an NDE, what I find is that there's so many of the stories have the same thing in common. And that is, I know my body was dead, but I was quite conscious. I was quite alive. I was able to traverse the universe. I was able to see loved ones. I was able to go someplace that felt very much like home to me, like the earth was a foreign entity that we're just slapped down into. I do a show called Soul School, which the whole premise of which is that our time here on earth is to learn and then to go home. Being plunged into 3D as we are. And since I give metaphysics much more credence than I give, the physical world, that makes sense to me. But tell me this is your show. I want you to talk about whatever you want to share. And then when you get me all excited, I'll just pipe in and ask you another question.
Right, okay. Well, yeah, so the book is about these verified near-death experiences, and it's something that fascinates me when people have those experiences and, it's like I said, they see something that's later verified, but it's not just something they might see where their body is, because there's maybe a skeptical argument that say, well, they weren't completely dead, they were still conscious. Perhaps they hallucinated what they were hearing and they could guess what happened. But in my book, there's lots of verifications where the people were in another part of a hospital or even miles away from where their body was. And I've got cases that go back to 1911.
Wow.
Well, there's a guy back there who had this near-death experience, and the way he described it's exactly how people describe them now. And that was a young man. He's 16 years old. He's walking down the road in London and a wall collapsed. And that's what hit him and how come he was out of body. And he was floating over his body, watching what was happening. And there was a doctor, luckily, on the street who said, let's get him to his home. They found his address and his paperwork in his pocket. And he worried about his mum. And suddenly, in an instant, he's with his mother at their house and somewhere else. He lived in London and they lived somewhere else. And the mother was doing some knitting and the father's reading the newspaper. And she suddenly says, my boy, something's happened to my boy. And the father's, oh, don't be silly. Nothing's happened. And
moms can feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he watched them talking about this, and she said, we've got to get the train to London. So he's okay, we'll get the train. And he went with them in, his spirit, and he was with them on the train. So later, when he was, back to normal, resuscitated, he said, I saw you do this and I saw you do that. And it was all confirmed as correct. So that was in 1911. And it's just like what we see nowadays. And there is a criticism of near-death experiences that it's so well known now that people might hallucinate it and they're not real because they know about it, because they've heard so much about it on TV or in podcasts. But, it does go back. Like there's one soldier that was written about, and I can't remember if it was Socrates or Plato, but this soldier, his name was he died on the battlefield like 2,000 years ago in Greece, and he came back to life. And Plato or Socrates wrote his story, what he talked about while he was dead. And again, it's just like today's near-death experiences. So in my book, there's 30 cases like this with all sorts of different verifications. And each chapter is dedicated to a different person. And I describe the whole near-death experience, not just the verifications, but how come they ended up in having a near-death experience, their spiritual experience, their life review, meeting spiritual beings, deceased loved ones. And there's also that idea of, well, if we can verify this thing you said you saw on Earth, and we know that's real, what does that say for the spiritual experience? That lends a lot more weight to that. And we can think, well, that's more likely to be real, because some might say, okay, you saw stuff down here, but the rest of it was a hallucination.
Right.
But then we know how powerful near-death experiences can be and how they change people for their whole lives. And having hallucinations doesn't do that to you.
No. And, I have found, based in, I've written 6 books and I get the same feedback all the time. And that is, reading your story, delving so deeply into it is very liberating. And I think that people will find that that's true of your work as well. That if they've ever had, I can't say that I've had a near-death experience, but I have come very close to death several times in my life. It does change you. And I was conscious in each instance. And there was intervention on my behalf in each and every instance that I came that close to dead. And I know that. And I don't need to convince anyone of it. And just like with, being touched by spirit, what I find is that you really shouldn't even bother to try to convince anybody of anything because of the way the human mind processes information. And even though we are capable of learning from other people's experiences, predominantly we like to rely on our own experiences to validate or verify anything that we might suspect. So in that respect, I think that this is information in the same way, like with UFOs. People could say, well, the internet is flooded with information about UFOs. And anybody that's a skeptic, or worse yet, a cynic, will say, yeah, 99.9% of that or 100% of that is made up in somebody's imagination. And then with the help of CGI or whatever else they're using, they create this to try to convince you of something, where I find that I can very, very easily distinguish between what is an actual UAP or UFO in the sky and what is not, what is either rigged or faked or CGI or AI or whatever. I can very, very easily tell the difference, even through a video, because I can feel it. I can feel when I'm seeing, because of my experiences. My mother had a near-death experience when she was quite young. I think she was only about 19. I was her only child at the time. And she left this world knowing that she had a baby, knowing that she had a husband, and it didn't matter to her. She was so happy where she was that she didn't really want to come back. And in my mother's situation, she was told that she had to come back because she had 4 more children that had not been born yet that had selected her to be their mom. And she was like, but it's so comfortable here and it's so nice. And she was told, when you go back into your body, it's going to hurt. You'll be, like crammed back into your body and you're injured and it's going to hurt. But you have to do this because you have a family to bring into the world. And it did. It hurt, but she recovered and she remembered it her whole life, but she didn't talk about it for 27 years later is when she first spoke about it. And I find so many of the people that have been interviewed, sometimes 25 or 30 years have passed before they feel comfortable enough to discuss this. Do you encounter that when you're trying to, accumulate these stories? What's your process? Is it just word of mouth? Is it you hear about someone and you interview them? How exactly do you accumulate your NDE stories?
Well, I have a workflow for my podcast where when I'm looking for guests, I go onto Amazon or sites like that, and I look through all the books that are new. And if somebody's written a book about a near-death experience, then I'll contact them and say, do you want to come on the podcast? And then I read their book to work out which questions I'm going to ask them. And now I've done, including my UFO podcast, I've done 800 episodes.
Wow.
So I've talked to a lot of people and I've read a lot of books. And that's how I find most of them. And that's how most of the people are in my book. They've been guests on my podcast. So I was able to quiz them about their whole near-death experience and these verification events. And I sent them the chapter when it was complete so they could check it for accuracy. So I've made sure it's very accurate throughout the book. But you're right, some of them kind of hide it away. And I wonder if, like decades ago, this idea of near-death experience was a lot more crazy and weird.
Yeah,
and
it was a taboo
subject.
subject. So were ghosts and spirits and UFOs. And 50, 60 years ago, these are not things that people spoke about. And, honestly, it's people like you and me and so many others that have the courage to just delve into this and put it out into the world that really create an awakening for others and liberates them to tell their own stories in whatever part of the genre under a very large paranormal umbrella. And so I think that's the greatest purpose that we serve, is that we not only inform, but we create through that information stream a permission structure to tell their own story, to not be afraid, not be, people are very quick to belittle and ridicule each other. And when you get to a point in life where you don't care anymore what anyone else thinks, because what you have to share is more important than that, that's when it clicks.
Yeah, I know. I get emails from people who may have like a lot of griefs. They've lost someone recently and they knew nothing about this stuff. And then they find these podcasts and these books, and it's so helpful for them. Because they may have thought the person that died, that's just the end of them. That's it. They're gone. And also occasionally I get emails from people who have a really powerful fear of death, and it keeps them awake at night. And then they hear this information, and that can really help them as well. So, things are getting better over time. And there's still the materialists out there, isn't there, who are completely against it. There's a thing in my book, I'm talking about my book again. This woman had this near-death experience where she was on the operating table and she died. And after they resuscitated her, she was able to say, well, this guy did this and these two were doing the CPR and this lady was on the phone calling the defibrillator and a man brought this thing in and the neurosurgeon was standing next to her and she said he clenched his fists and he even clenched his teeth and he said, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this, and he stormed out of the room. But he couldn't accept that this was happening. But then the other surgeon sat with her and said, oh, tell us again, what did you see? Explain it all. Because he could see something had really happened there. So I think those people are still around, those materialists who, in a way, can't handle it. It's almost like it's just too much for them. They have a paradigm that they live in, and it's too much of a challenge.
It fractures it. It does. Especially, I find, when somebody's very staunch religious beliefs are challenged or fractured because of something that they've either witnessed or that's happened to them. That is the most difficult emotional hurdle. And I just try to comfort them. I'm like, you don't have to believe a word I say. I tell them about, growing up in a very old, very haunted farmhouse in New England, up in Rhode Island. And I'm very honest about it. I'm not here to convince you of anything. You take from this whatever you will. But I will tell you this, I have no fear of death because of growing up in that house. For the 10 years that I spent in that house, I learned everything that I needed to know about life and death and the afterlife. I have no fear of death. I don't want to die in pain, but death itself is merely a transition. It's just that quick ride home. Now, and I know I don't come from here anyway. I don't come from here. I have been a misfit on this planet my whole entire life. I have been looking at this place going, really, what is this? And why am I here? And it took me 60 years to come to terms with precisely why I'm here, where I finally felt completely, utterly, totally comfortable sharing my experiences fully and the experiences of others fully, with no qualms at all. I think that ultimately, and it's, I'm sure, not true of every individual, Simon, but I think most people that reject any notion of the paranormal are actually really afraid. They're fear-based carbon units. They don't have a mind that's open to the possibility and the potential of a limitless universe. No, they cannot. They're young souls. Maybe they are just so indoctrinated in a certain mindset that they cannot break free of it. And therefore, they feel like it insults their intelligence, or it insults their belief system, or they really struggle. And I just got to the point where I don't care. Struggle away. Have your struggles. Just why don't you just try to educate yourself first? Because these things happened. I didn't believe in, when I was a kid, I didn't believe in, I didn't disbelieve either, but I didn't believe in reincarnation. That seemed somehow implausible to me, that we could possibly be recycled souls. Until one night, my mom put it on PBS, and we were watching something from the BBC that was on our local PBS station, and it was about a reincarnation incident of a young boy who was born into a family on the other side of the Yangtze in China. And he got to be up around 10 years old. And one day he went to his parents and he said, "You're not my parents. My parents live in the village across the other side of the river. Could you please take me to see my parents? I miss them." And of course, their reaction was, okay, great. Our 10-year-old has completely lost his mind. But he was so convincing that they packed up the horse and the cart and crossed the bridge and went to the village that he knew that he was from. And he went right to their door and knocked. And when the parents opened the door, they embraced this child that they knew as their daughter, who had drowned in the river 10 years before. And I was like, wow, okay, wow. That child in his transition from a female to a male on a different part of the country, not that far, but separated by a mighty river, knew enough and remembered enough of his immortality to be able to go home. And I'm sorry to get emotional, but still, I saw this 50 years ago, and I'm still like, oh God. Because what happened was both sets of parents got to know each other, and they moved in together, all of them, and they raised the children together so that this young boy could have his original parents, and that they all helped each other and lived together until the children had all grown to adulthood. And I find that amazing, that something like that could happen and how it affected all of their lives.
And it comes up so often now. It seems that children with past life memories is so well studied, and there's so many books out there. And even when my daughter was, say, 3 years old, she said one thing to me. She said, I used to pick you up when you were this small. And I said to her, pardon? And she was like, well, I didn't say anything. Wow. But it's also, there's a thing, isn't there, with birthmarks that seem to relate to the previous life. Yeah. And I've got a book all about that, Ian Stevenson, and there's 100 cases in there with all these different injuries in the past life that seem to be seen in this life. Even
it leaves a mark.
Yeah, and there's one with a past life where a man was murdered. Somebody came up behind him and shot him. And the boy had a birthmark in the back of his head and one at the front of his head that were exactly the same places as the bullet wounds. And the one on the back was small and the one on the top was bigger. But he'd remembered so much about that life before they even checked the autopsy of the previous person to match that stuff up. So it can be really powerful. And I've also talked to a woman, Jenny Cockle, and I think she's nearly 60 now, and she still remembers these past lives, and she always has done. And she tracked down this family in Ireland where she used to be the mother, and she had so much detail that she tracked down the children that used to be hers, but now, she's younger than them. Yeah. And eventually, by what she said, they accepted her as their reincarnated mother because she just knew so much. It's like she'd say to them, do you remember that time in the back garden where you caught that frog and you were playing with it too much and the frog died and I was so angry with you? And they're like, how could you possibly know that? It's not like something that happened in 1932 would be on Facebook and you could have read about it or something. So, yeah, and I'm a hypnotherapist. I take people through past life regression, and I've done hundreds of sessions with people. And so I've seen so much evidence of reincarnation.
What do you find, or do you in actuality find a lot of situations or memories that come up through hypnotherapy that are similar from people that don't know each other at all? I know Dolores Cannon, when she started really getting into regressions with people who claimed that they had been taken. I don't like the word abducted. It's got such a negative connotation, but for lack of a better, taken or visited. And they will draw pictures of beings that are virtually identical to each other. And one person will be in Australia and one will be in Iceland, and they never met each other. And why are we getting the exact same descriptions of beings and vessels that there's no way they could have compared notes?
Yeah, it's my UFO podcast. That's the side of things that I'm particularly interested in. There's some podcasts that do a lot about disclosure and is the government going to tell us stuff? But I'm much more interested in alien contact and the consciousness side of it, because it can get very weird how it relates to consciousness and how the ETs seem to be maybe even to move into that space that we might say is the afterlife, which is all around us. It's just at a higher frequency.
Right.
I had a lady on my podcast who she woke up one night standing next to her bed, and there were 4 of these grey aliens at the foot of her bed. And she looked round at her bed and her body was still in the bed. It's like she was out of body.
Yeah.
And that shocked her. And suddenly she was slammed back in her body and she sat up, and those ETs weren't there. But, you think actually they are still there. They're just, you might say they're in the astral, the etheric plane.
In a different realm. Yes, exactly. A different dimension. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had an incident right here in this house on that sofa 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. I mean, it's just, I tell them all the time. I'm very, very, I have wonderful, wonderful relationships with the galactic family. I had my first conscious contact when I was 12 years old, 13, I think. I had just had my 13th birthday, but I knew that I'd had, multiple engagements, interactions prior to that. But that was my first conscious contact, where there was absolutely no question what I was seeing. And so I've told them all these years and kept it mostly to myself for decades. But I tell them all the time, you're absolutely allowed in. Wherever I am is your home too. You may join me, come with me, be with me, put me under your little dome of protection when I have to travel in airplanes that seem to routinely fall out of the sky now. I was just laying on the bed, Simon, I'm telling you, just on the sofa, just watching TV with my eyes closed. And my little dog, Peanut Buttercup, who's sound asleep over here, was laying on me. And all of a sudden, she woke up and she jumped off the sofa and she went over to the recliner that's right behind right there. And she laid back down and she went right to sleep. My initial reflection on that was I got too hot. She got too hot and wanted to go and cool off. But that's not what happened at all. Someone directed her to jump off of me, go on her recliner, which is affectionately known as her fainting sofa, and lay there and go to sleep while mommy gets a treatment. And it felt as though my body had been lifted up, just slightly lifted, and then submerged into something that was denser, more heavy than water, very warm, and it had a fluctuating frequency. I could literally feel the vibrations moving through the water and completely surrounding me. My head was covered, but I could still breathe. It was highly pressurized, very pressurized. It lasted for about a minute to maybe 90 seconds, and then it subsided. And there I was, just laying on the sofa. And all of a sudden, Peanut popped her head over and came up and got back up on top of me because now it was okay to do that. And I've asked them, just don't scare my little dog. You can do anything you want to do to me. Don't scare Peanut. And then the next day, I had a PET scan for battling stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And 6 months ago, it was all through my body, and my oncologist gave me up for dead. I mean, she did. She was very kind about it, but she basically said, people just don't get beyond this. And now there's hardly any cancer left in my body, hardly any, in 6 months on an aromatase inhibitor and a drug that's just meant to hold the cancer at bay. I take it every day. It's chemo, but it's basically to hold it at bay. And last week when I went in to see her, she said, I have to reverse my initial diagnosis, which was inoperable and incurable. And she said, you won't hear those words from me anymore. You are on your way to complete, whole, restored health. And I don't know who you know, but this doesn't happen, Andrea. This doesn't happen. And, I had at least 40 tumors in my body that they can't find in a PET scan anymore. I'm this close to free of this. And what am I going to do, Simon? I'm going to write a book about it. Because if this can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. It can. You can either lay down, accept the diagnosis, accept the assessment, and say, okay, I'm going to die. I'll get my things in order, give away all my valuables and just die. Or you can say, oh, hell no. And call in the light brigade. And I don't care who it is. And I don't care who it is. I have multiple engagements with multiple races that look very different from each other, very different. But they're all working together on my behalf, and there is no question in my mind about that. And my faith has never been stronger. And I don't know how everybody up there knows each other, but they do. And, my mother passed away last June. My baby sister passed away in 2017. They're in on it too. They have been seen in this house, watching over me. I mean, I've got human beings, earthlings, mortals praying for me en masse, and everything else that's going on up there. And I'm not even giving into this. I'm not even giving into this. And I am so humble and I am so grateful. And I just know that whatever that was, whoever that was that healed me while I was laying watching TV on a late night, is right with me right now. Right with me right now. Knows I'm talking to you. You are known. I mean, I can see the corona around you. I see corona of light around you. It's not your aura. It's something else. And it's actually very, very beautiful.
And do you think they're looking after you because you're in some way a communicator now with the podcast, and you're spreading this information? You might say spreading the light. And so that they need you to be doing this job.
Yeah, that's part of it. That is part of it. I know what my mission here is now. I do. And I had to experience this. I have to experience this so that I can help others overcome it, so that they do not succumb to what they think are the rules of 3D, but can actually transcend this dimension and heal in alternate dimensions and then return to this dimension. I don't spend a lot of time in 3D. I don't like it. I find it very oppressive, very heavy, very laden with grief and loss and destruction. And I love the planet, but I don't like what's happening to it, and I don't like what's happening on it. And so I'm in that constant conflict where I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. I'm, off in 4D with spirits. I'm off in 5D and beyond with my galactic family. I astral project literally to the other side of the world in a split second. And that's my superpower. And it's all based, my generator is based in love, because where I'm from, that's everything. It's all love and empathy and compassion and kindness and beauty. And that's where I'm from. And so it's no wonder that Earth feels so foreign to me. But there's great beauty and joy here too. So I've had to kind of weave my way through this, Simon, and it's difficult. There's nothing easy about living this life. And I don't want to come back, and I can't even believe I might have agreed to come here in the first place. I feel that there was some kind of universal clerical error, and I was supposed to go someplace else, because this has been so hard. And it's because I'm so sensitive to everything, especially emotions, especially human emotions, and even more so animal emotions, even more so. I'm like the original Dr. Dolittle. I talk to animals all the time. They understand me. I understand them. I can tell you what the issue is. I can tell you what the problem is, and it's resolved. And that is I was born knowing how to read sheet music. I was born knowing how to play numerous instruments that I was never taught to play. I just would pick them up and play them. And how do you explain that? I'm not a prodigy. I'm not. I came with a skill set, and so did you. So did you. You have a corona of light around you that every one of my viewers is going to see. They're going to see that. And you have a very specific mission that is very closely akin to my own, my dear. And this will not be your only time on a world awakening. It will not. You're coming back again and again.
Yeah, but I've been taken through many past life regressions and seen all sorts of past lives. But when you were younger, like you said, 12 years old, did you ever get scared? Because for myself, I think I really would get scared. I had
No.
a thing happened maybe a year ago. I was lying in bed and there was a flash of light, and it was maybe 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And I looked up, and looked like a shadow person on the other side of my bedroom. And then they moved to the left, and then they started walking over towards me, and I was freaked out, and the adrenaline's going, and I was feeling quite scared. And it turned out it was my wife, and she'd just gone to the bathroom. That's what the light was. She opened the door, and the light came in from the hallway.
Mhm.
And so I get that scared when it's just my wife. I don't know what I'd do if an ET showed up in my bedroom.
There's nothing to fear. There's absolutely nothing to fear. I get multitudes of messages from them all the time. I get downloads every day. Most of the downloads that I receive are going directly into my subconscious, and the words will come out of me of the message at the strangest times. But I know that I didn't think the thought consciously before I spoke it, that I'm just the conduit. But you know, the messages that I am getting is that I'm here for a purpose. I have a reason to be here at this time right now, that humanity is in the midst of a pivotal paradigm shift where we are making that transition in consciousness, really a quantum leap in evolution. And I don't mean all of us. I mean enough of us to change the world. Just enough of us that are making contact, that are perfectly comfortable with it. You know, one of my great taglines is "Be not afraid." You know, we are the ones. You know, my mother always said, "Fear the living, not the dead." You know, she was right. She was right. You know, and I look around at this world and I'm so appalled, absolutely appalled by what I see, that I got to a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. As my mother was passing away slowly every day, losing her a little bit more every day, I wanted to go with her. And then boom, I've got cancer, because I put something out to the universe and it said, okay, is that what you want? There you go. And it gave me an entirely new perspective, an entirely new appreciation for my life that I didn't have before. I was always looking around to make my great escape. And now I need to stay. I want to stay so that I can encourage others to get through what I'm going through with the same ease and the same enlightenment that it has brought into my life. It's not a curse. It's been a blessing. It has.
It's kind of like you're on a spiritual path, or it's part of the plan, and it's your life up until this point has been your apprenticeship. All the different experiences have been you in training to do what you're doing now. And I might look back at myself, and I'm nearly 60, and think, oh man, why couldn't I have got my training done by the time I was 30? And I could have been doing this a lot longer. But I do feel that people get onto a spiritual path and the universe nudges them along a step at a time. And it might be because they have a spiritual experience or they see a UFO. It's just something so out of the ordinary that really makes you think that there's more to us than just flesh and blood.
Yes, there certainly is. And that's why I find near-death experiences that are highly credible. I haven't read about or witnessed, an interview with one person yet where I was like, I don't know about that one. No, I mean, when you're willing to put yourself out into the world with something so phenomenal, then I think you should automatically be given the benefit of the doubt. And I think you would probably agree with me that the words "I love you" are very, very powerful in this language or any other. But another very powerful set of words is "I believe you." I believe you. And when the more and more and more of us that are exposed to these kinds of experiences, that know that when somebody else is telling us what has happened to them, what they have experienced, to validate that and say, I believe you, because guess what? Something very similar happened to me. And then there's a conversation, and then there's engagement, and there's expansion. And a human mind expanded will not contract. It doesn't work in the reverse. Once your mind is open, it is open. Once you have been touched by spirit, you've been touched by spirit, and you can deny it till the cows come home. But it doesn't matter, because eventually it's going to make its presence known to you again and said, see, I'm right here and I never left. No, it's a wondrous way to live, Simon. You're living a wondrous life, and you're doing such a huge service to humanity. And I am too, and I know that's why Bill wanted to put us together for this. I know it is. Well, it's your show and I'm talking, so you talk and say things that you want to say, and I will drink berry juice.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say is that I've done so many of these episodes, and I've had so many experiences of my own that I'm so sure that there is life after death, and that in my book I call it Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife.
Yeah.
And I was putting it on my Facebook page, and somebody commented on it, said, no, it's evidence. It's not proof. Science hasn't proved it.
It's empirical evidence. That's proof. Empirical evidence is proof.
It's like, for some reason, maybe decades or hundreds of years ago, scientists were made the people who decide for all of us what is real. And so if scientists say it's not real, then we just have to accept it's not real. But for me, with all these cases in the book and all the others that I've researched, it's enough proof for me.
Yeah.
And that is what gives you that feeling of there's so much more to us and so much more to the universe. By taking people through past life regressions, I've encountered many spirit guides who always say that they're with us and they're on our side, and that they'll help us if we just ask for their help. And, the little experiences I've had, I haven't had major stuff. I've seen UFOs a couple of times, and I've had weird psychic things happening and feathers showing up. But it's like that's my spiritual path, and each step I'm taking on it, and everybody can be on this sort of path if they open their mind. It's like some people will see these signs from the other side but just dismiss them as a coincidence or nonsense.
Which is a nice word to explain away the otherwise inexplicable events that happen in our lives. They just can't comprehend it. And so instead, they dismiss it, because that's the easy way out. That's not somebody who's intellectually precocious or even allows themselves to be curious. That's someone who has boxed themselves in to their own personal comfort zone. And unfortunately, sometimes it really takes a good shakeup, a real good experience, to not traumatizing, informational. I've never been afraid of any of the, I've had every other emotion you can have as a human being associated with the engagements that I have had. At the top of the list is wonder, wide-eyed wonder. Oh my God, wonder. Never fear, never fear. Not once have I been fearful, because I know that they are us, we are them, and all are one. And when humanity gets to a point where we achieve a realization of our oneness, not only as one human race, but our oneness with the cosmos, with the universe, with the prime creator, God, whatever you want to call it, whatever that is, source energy, whatever you want to call it. And I would defy anybody to tell me that Albert Einstein wasn't a preeminent scientist who was a man of deep faith. And he said, as many other scientists have, it will be the merging of science and spirituality that will create the quantum leap humanity needs to make in its own evolution. And I believe that.
Yeah, and some people say that these skeptics will say, well, science can't explain near-death experiences now, but they will do, and they sort of write them off. But I would say, well, if they do explain near-death experiences, and the explanation is, yes, consciousness continues, and that we don't die when our body does. And I feel like all this stuff's coming together with the UFOs and consciousness is what I'm so interested in. And we call it the abduction phenomenon, and maybe abduction's not a great word, but people seem to be taken from their bodies when they're taken.
Yeah, I prefer to think of it as a nice visit. I do. I mean, I really do. I love them. I love them in a way that I don't even think I'm capable of loving humanity. And I love humanity. I love my family and my friends and so many extraordinary experiences, but I love them differently. And I call it higher love. It's a feeling that I've never had between myself and another human being, even my own mother, who I worshiped. This is different. So let me, in our last minute, because the mean producer is telling me we have 1 minute left, let me invite you back for a follow-up program, and Bill will schedule it so that it works for your time over in Great Britain. And we'll just pick up where we left off, Simon, because you're fabulous. And I pre-loved you based on what he told me about you. And now I can tell you that I love you, and I would love to have you back. And he will send me the information that I need, and I will do everything in my power to promote your work, because I think it's phenomenal, and so are you. Thank you for joining me for the show tonight.
Thanks a lot. It's really nice of you to say that. Very kind words. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, sweetheart. You take care, and Bill will give you all of my contact information, and we will stay in touch. Okay.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you. And everybody that's watching tonight, thank you so much for joining us on A World Awakening. You know it's pre-recorded because there's light coming in the doors. But it's because of the time change between here and England. And we will do it again. And I thank you all so much for joining in and being witness to something truly, deeply spiritual and truly enlightening. Thank you, Simon. And good night to all of you. Be the light you seek in this world. Be the beacon. Be the light.